So, hi group mates. So today we will going to discuss one of the key figure in intellectual revolution and his contributions, namely René Descartes. But before we tackle him and his contributions, let me show you first the questions that we will be answering throughout our discussion. First, what is the intellectual revolution all about? Who are the key figures in the revolution? How did the revolution advance modern science and scientific thinking at the time? What controversies met the revolution? How was the contribution of the key figure impact society in general? And what are the practical applications today of the key figure's contribution to science? So, what is the intellectual revolution all about? The scientific revolution was a set of circumstances that characterized the formation of modern science during the early modern period, when developments in mathematics, physics, astronomy, biology, and chemistry altered society's perceptions of nature. It also refers to a significant shift in scientific thought that occurred in the 60th and 17th century. During the scientific revolution, a new understanding of the nature arose, displacing the Greek perspective that had dominated research for over 2,000 years. Science evolved as an independent subject, distinct from both philosophy and technology, and it started to be considered as having utilitarian purposes.
Thank you, Ms. Reginald. Now, let me introduce to you René Descartes as one of the key figures in the revolution. During the year 1543 up to 1678, Descartes is one of many key figures in the revolution. Descartes, the father of philosophy, led the 17th century European intellectual revolution. Descartes, the originator of deductive reasoning, was a failure as a practical scientist, but a mathematical success, integrating number and form in his work geometry, which detailed how the motion of a point could be visually traced by comparing its position to planes of reference. Some other key figures with René Descartes were Francis Bacon and Thomas Hobbes. Now, let me discuss to you how did the revolution advance the modern science and scientific thinking at the time. Descartes, it advances because of the inventions of Descartes. He contributes to the field of science, mathematics, and also in philosophy. Descartes was a famous scientist and mathematician. He created the Cartesian coordinate system, established analytic geometry, and laid the groundwork for calculus. He has made scientific he has made significant contribution to physics, particularly in the realm of optics. René Descartes discovered logical reasoning techniques, developed a methodology for using letters as mathematical variables, and discovered how to plot points on a Cartesian plane. He invented analytical geometry, and skepticism was established as a necessary aspect of scientific method. He is recognized as one of the history's greatest philosophers. His analytical geometry was a huge conceptual leap forward, bringing together the formerly disparate science and geometry and algebra. He also wrote one of the most influential works of modern philosophy, the on the Method.
Thank you, James. Of course, Rene Descartes also had controversies met the revolution, namely meditations on first philosophy, replies to objections to the meditations, the principles of philosophy, the world, and his work Passions of the Soul. So for the first controversy, the meditations on first philosophy, elaborate ko muna how he argued about this work. So Descartes contends in this argument that the act of thinking itself provides proof of individual human being. As in like yung word na I myself must exist to perform the thinking. He argued in arguments that follow from this assumption that while he can't be certain of anything else about his existence, he can't establish without a shadow of a doubt that he has hands, hair, or a body. He is convinced that he has ideas and the ability to reason. He also argued that anything that may be noticed through clear and distinct senses is part of what is observed because they are readily recognized. Thought and reason must constitute the core of mankind. One last lesson is that Descartes is aiming to win his reader away from reliance on sense pictures as a source of or assistance to knowing. People should instead acquire accustomed to thinking without visuals in order to properly grasp things that are not easily or accurately represented by them, such as God and the mind. And as a result, immaterial mental objects, and according to him, are better known and hence better sources of knowledge than extended things. Yung sumunod, replies to objections to the meditations. Naging controversy din yung mga naging replies niya sa kanyang work. The meditations were published with arguments authored by the day's prominent philosophers, as well as Descartes' responses to those objections. The objections and replies ended up being significantly longer than the original text, demonstrating once again the concision is a scene in philosophy. The principles of philosophy. Descartes planned to break into the textbook market by creating a introductory work for Catholic colleges of the time. This may have worked as well, except that much of what he was teaching was deemed to contradict Catholic thinking, leading to allegations that he was an atheist and a heretic. So for the fourth one, the world, his work, the world. Descartes sought to explain everything there was to explain in this work. He described how the earth revolved around the sun rather than other way around. Descartes hastily removed his work from the publisher after learning that the church had just condemned Galileo for teaching the same thing. And lastly, for his work Passions of the Soul. Of course, Descartes was well known for being a rationalist or someone who emphasizes the importance of reason. However, in this work, he meditated on the nature of emotions, aiming to explain them in terms of the physical body. He characterized laughing as blood coming from the right side cavity of the heart through the artery vein and suddenly and frequently inflating the lungs, pushing the air in them to rush out through the windpipe, where it forms an inarticulate explosive sound. That is all.
Okay, thank you, group mates, for telling me and everyone about Rene Descartes. So, all of his works had an impact to society. So, in terms of society, how was his contribution? How did his contribution impact society in general? So, yung Cartesian coordinate system niya, it paved the way for calculus. So, Calculus is used to improve architecture and the creation of a structure in architecture. By having precise measurements and dimensions, calculus is very helpful in architecture because it helps you with those little things. And hindi lang sa architecture nagagamit yung Cartesian coordinate system. It's also used in maps when you're traveling, like in Google Maps then or in Waze. You can pinpoint the direction that you want to go and it will guide you there. Okay, and next slide. Here we will talk about his contributions in science and how it played out throughout history. And his Cartesian coordinate system, it allowed the visualization of algebraic problems. What he meant by this is it gave algebraic equations a true meaning. And because math was uh, there was no true exact definition for certain equations. So Rene Descartes made the Cartesian coordinate system so you can visualize your problem and hopefully get a correct answer. So without the system, yun nga, algebraic equations will not have a tangible way to confirm the results and it will lead to a lot of inaccuracies. So thank thanks to Rene Descartes for making the Cartesian coordinate system. And with that, it ends our discussion about Rene Descartes and his contributions to science and the society. Thank you so much for listening to. We hope you learned a lot, and thank you to my group mates for doing their work and helping with the discussion. So we hope you learned a lot. Thank you very much.